So quick introduction for myself and my colleague here. Again, I'm joined by the illustrious Tom Kassane. He is vice chairman at CCS and has been with the firm since, well, for a while, but that's what happens when you are a prodigy. You start young. In any case, really thrilled to be presenting with him today. My name is Angel Flores. I'm a senior vice president with the firm and the lead of our gift planning practice group. A number of my colleagues are on today, and I have to say, not that I'm biased, but they're some of the best people working at CCS, and I'm so thrilled to be able to work with them on a daily basis. So today's topics, quick introduction by Tom, then we'll get into the meat of our discussion today, which is all about findings from our recent report, which you all will get a copy of along with the recording tomorrow. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So really excited to hear what you all have to say, what you're experiencing, and how you feel about the information that we're sharing. So with that, I'll pass it off to Tom.
Angel, thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. I hate to single somebody out, but I just saw that Dominic Pepper just joined the chat. It's Dominic, hope all is well. We miss you. We love you, brother. Continued best wishes to all that you're doing. Dominic is one of our cherished sort of alumna at CCS, and he, along with Angel and others, have been just tremendous in the work having to do with gift planning over the past half decade, which is just a critically important part of all of our work, as we know. You know, in a recent CCS philanthropic pulse, we surveyed about 2,000 colleagues, 2,000 folks who share your particular position in development, and asked them about the kinds of things that they want to learn more about, investigate in, collaborate with. And among the 10 different types of courses, gift planning ranked third in terms of interest. And so together, we are so excited to offer to you this report on the state of planned giving in fundraising, because it is a massive disruptor in a landscape that is experiencing tremendous transformation, from the digital work that we all know about, e-philanthropy, of course, artificial intelligence. But gift planning is one that for some is a mystery, for others, they're intimidated by it. And so the hope today is that we enlighten you and collaborate with you on sharing some solutions, because together, the 700 or 800 of us that are on this Zoom today, hopefully come out of this with one or two really good ideas that could be applied very practically and thoughtfully at our particular place. My name is Tom Kassane, and as introduced, I serve as the vice chair with Bo Rice under the leadership of Rick Happy, our chair, and the several hundred of us who are so grateful to be part of the CCS experience. And we are privileged to work with several hundred nonprofits a year, covering all the sectors from the environment to cultural institutions to advocacy to higher ed. And it is our hope that we continue to partner with these tremendous people who just do transformational work in so many different types of spaces. And we look forward to doing that for years to come. We've got a couple of things for you. We've got hopefully some insights, some findings. Of course, as a fundraising consulting firm, we got to burden you with a data point. We got to give you some results. But before we do that, we want to pepper you with some questions and some polls. And the idea here is to share with you some questions that we'd ask everyone to be ready to respond to. And so the first one, as you see on the screen, is what's the biggest challenge that you face when it comes to planned giving? And we're asking you to choose one of these particular items. What's the biggest challenge as you think about planned giving? Is it resources? Is it staff? Is it a need for continued expertise? Is it, of course, the constant data issues with your CRM? And so as we're looking at this particular response already, you can see on the screen that there's some parity in the answers, but it looks like the two leading responses, maybe three leading responses, have to do with staff experience, right? Dedicated staff. So they're kind of together in terms of personnel resources. And for the smart ones on the group, all of the above. Yeah, so look at that, folks. So we have about 400 responses already, and nearly a third of the challenges that you face have to do with staff experience. That's really interesting, because if I were to ask you to write down three numbers before we get into the findings, it would be the number 3. You can write that down. Number 252, and then 293. And I think 293 relates to the response to the biggest challenges you have. So three is again, of the 10 or 12 different topics that we talk about over the course of a year, plan giving comes in third out of those dozen options. So it tells us how important it is to all of you. Number 252. 252 is it's 250, a planned gift is 252 times larger than an average annual gift, if you can believe it. It's 252 times. And then 293 is fascinating again, because it relates to the poll in that nonprofits are raising 293% more each year if they provide a dedicated staff person to plan giving. So 3 times the revenue if you could deploy one person to this staff planning. So naturally, as you think about establishing your budgets, as you collaborate with your development teams, as you encourage your CEOs and your boards to invest in fundraising, that is a clear statistic that can tell you the ROI and investment in this work. We will tell you that gift planning is indeed a culture, as you see on the next slide. And we define it as an organization that truly embraces it. It's not a department. It's not a sub sort of area within the development team. We hope that it is part of the kind of underpinning of development and stewardship and philanthropy with your particular offices. And there's a few things that leap off the page on this slide that I think kind of defines why it drives results. One is that the amount of available assets is way beyond cash at this point, and it's growing dramatically. It's extraordinary. Some of us know the statistics. You'll see here that literally trillions. Some reports suggest upwards of $50 trillion is expected to be transferred in terms of wealth over the next 6 to 10 years. It's an enormous amount of resources. The larger gifts, so 92% of the wealth in this country is in non-cash assets. Fourthly, in some challenges, those of you who looked at the Giving USA report that came out in June noted that in sometimes when there is sort of an unstable economy, if there's inflation, we're coming off 2 historic years. So the experts, in a sense, predicted that 2022 would be relatively flat, given the tremendous response to the pandemic and social justice issues in this country. But in a period of an unstable economy, cash is retained, it's kept close, it's less disposable. And therefore, the asking of assets is particularly important. And it demonstrates a true partnership. The final point on this particular slide is really critical in terms of a donor-centric culture, in terms of driving your donors to remain very tethered in authentic and genuine ways, so that for the benefit of the donor themselves, but also for the benefit of the nonprofit, a planned gift truly tethers a donor to the impact, the mission, and the realities that are faced for your nonprofit. Let's drive that culture, folks, as we can. We want to offer you some insights on some key findings and insights based upon curated reports, based upon surveys that we've conducted over the past year. We hope that those of you who get a chance to take a look at these findings, please know we'll share this deck with you, or have some questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll be able to answer them as we go through the particular document. But there's a few particular insight and findings that I'd like to share with you in advance of a more comprehensive approach by Angel. So here's a few things. So legacy gifts, 16%. That's a significant amount, increasing dramatically year over year in terms of overall fundraising. Annual donors, right, are usually those potential candidates who are best positioned to be your legacy donors. And you'll see that only 3 subsectors engaged in annual donors for legacy gifts. And so your annual donors obviously are available to you. There are ways in which communication can happen to inform them of the opportunities in terms of legacy giving. But what this tells you is that there's enormous space in terms of the work that's available to all of us. These percentages reflect the idea, once again, that if we can invest in staff, if we can focus on long-time annual donors, so those that have been with you 5, 10, 15 years, these can indeed create the sustainable source of future cash. And blended gifts. More and more nonprofits, especially when it comes to campaigning, recognize that you have annual fundraising, you've got your events, you've got perhaps a capital campaign that encourages multi-year commitments. And then, of course, most nonprofits seek large endowments for long-term sustainability. So in an ideal scenario, you're asking folks to sustain their giving with an annual gift, to advance it through a multi-year pledge. But boy, wouldn't it be great to help endow a particular mission or cause or initiative through some type of a planned gift. Again, great opportunities here. As you can next, if you don't mind, just taking a look at the next slide, is another poll. So as you think about this poll, this is a very practical approach to the work that you're doing. So the question is, have you included or are you about to include legacy gifts in your campaigns themselves? So about 1 in 4 are not currently in campaign. We can help you with that, by the way, hint, hint. But the predominant number, more than half, are including legacy gifts in campaigns. The Chronicle of Philanthropy back in February reports on the largest gifts. So they report on the 50 largest gifts from the previous year. And it was extraordinary to see the number of gifts that were provided at 8 and 9 figure levels, 10 figure levels at some point. But that a substantial number of them included obviously legacy gifts, which is extraordinary. Okay, that's great. Let's look at the legacy gifts in terms of how significant they are in terms of the average annual gift. As I mentioned before, one of those 3 numbers was 252. So among all nonprofit sectors, not just the colleges and the hospitals or the large nonprofits with enormous databases, but across all subsectors, there's a ratio of 252 to 1, and that's legacy gifts to annual gifts. So an annual gift, so with an average legacy gift value of more than 120,000. So let me explain that again. So the average legacy gift value is 120,000, and that is 252 times the average annual gift. Just extraordinary. In terms of the big differences between average gift size and legacy gift size, we witness that more profoundly in terms of environment and animal welfare, arts and culture, and humanities. And so once again, you see opportunities for legacy gifts that are extraordinary. You'll see the next data point in the yellow looks at a percentage of revenue. So you'll see here, the percentage of revenue is pretty clear. That, for instance, the high water would be, or those with the most success would be both private and secondary education, primary and secondary education, as well as environmental and animal welfare. The rest fall between about 2 and 3% of legacy giving versus percentage of total revenue. The thinking is that the environmental and animal welfare is you have a lot of long-term donors. So it's not uncommon for these particular organizations who have donors giving gifts at $100, $500, $1,000, but doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. And in terms of secondary education, of course, there's an attachment to that secondary school, that primary school that lasts a long time. So you see once again that the annual gifts and long-term donors is the great opportunity in terms of driving enormous legacy gift potential. Thanks, Angel. Another poll, folks. I know you feel like you're in school, even though it's early August. You're back to school with CCS. So here's, I think, a Captain Obvious question, which is, has your organization ever received a legacy gift that was not expected or previously known? So we're going to pop up that poll in just a second.
So not surprising. Yep, the vast majority get these surprise gifts. Not a bad thing.
No, not at all. We see that more often in faith-based giving than the other sectors. So as you know, folks, when you take a look at the report, about 30% of giving in this country last year, about 500 billion, comes from faith-based organizations. And we've witnessed that the vast majority of those nonprofits, it's an unexpected legacy gift. And imagine the kind of planning that can take place by those kinds of organizations or any nonprofit if there was a sort of a deeper forecasting and better visibility to the potential revenue. So we want to take a look at now at undocumented gifts as obviously missed opportunities. Okay, so nonprofits receive a third more funding from documented legacy gifts, a full third than unknown legacy donors, which is tremendous. And the value is significant, from 82 million to 55 million. And again, this is based on a survey of a couple of thousand folks in terms of how they responded to the undocumented versus documented commitment, but a full third. So think about your own particular application. If you're getting, $3, $4, $5 million a year, or even $1 or $2 or $3 million a year, and if the vast majority of that is either unknown or undocumented, you could think of the potential that looks here. And then, of course, when the gift is documented, the average gift is extremely high, nearly 600,000 compared to perhaps unknown legacy gifts at 24,000. The trick, of course, is what? It's identifying who those folks are, speaking to them, but you need the staff to do it. And so, as we all know, in this fundraising ecosystem, when you responded early on about a particular challenge, it's in terms of staff expertise and actually just the availability of staff. If that investment can be made, if there's a convincing of others within your organization to do so, this is yet just another data point that's available to them. So insights, right? So discuss those plans with the donors, right? To try to clarify their intention. And why would you want to do that? One, of course, is because perhaps they have a particular interest in your nonprofit they want to see fostered, that they want to see protected, or they want to see advanced. And so this is an opportunity for them to declare their intention, to make it fully known, so that you can work with them in a particular plan. And of course, if you have that kind of conversation with them, it could potentially increase that gift amount because it aligns with something that you're trying to address, right? There's always a promising opportunity or a pressing need. And if you could share those opportunities or needs, there's the potential for the donor to increase their gift. If you're unsure where to start, what we've worked with a number of organizations is surveys. We did one for a higher education institution here in the East Coast. We sent it out to about 13,000 graduates, and there were nearly 800 that responded that either they had a gift plan underway or they were interested in some type of legacy commitment. That was enormous. Inexpensive to do, helps you prioritize. If you're understaffed, it allows you to channel the energy and resources to that particular area. I have one more slide before I turn it over to Angel.
Hey, Tom, I just want to chime in just
Sure.
quickly, because there's a relevant question to what we have listed here. So a question from Sandra: can you define expected undocumented legacy gifts? Great question, Sandra. I will tell you, this was a source of a lot of internal conversation when pulling together the survey. What we mean by this is that these are gifts that an organization knows about, right? Your donor has told you, oh yeah, you're in my will. They may have even told you the amount, but you don't have anything in writing. Nothing, no formal pledge, no formal letter of intent. It may not even be noted in the database, but it is known. So that's how we define expected undocumented gifts. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, of course. Some very familiar names in the chat. Great, Al Alvarez is on the chat, so great. So final slide for me in terms of relationships, and what we've uncovered through our surveys and our experience is that there isn't a clear relationship that necessarily exists between the legacy gift revenue and the endowment size, just none whatsoever. The endowment size to legacy gift ratio is under 20-1 across all subsectors of the nonprofit landscape. The social and human service area is less likely to have an endowment than nonprofits and other sectors. That's largely because of the pressing needs on a day-to-day basis for these social and human services. They're confronted constantly with change. I was with a tremendous social service agency yesterday, and they work with homelessness, food insecurity, behavioral health issues, human trafficking. And they're trying to design a vision for the next 2 to 3 years, recognizing that there is an unforeseen challenge in the human service space that they don't even know about right now because of just the dramatic societal issues in the United States today. And so they often have to be extraordinarily nimble and thus they may not have the opportunity to invest in endowments or have the opportunity to wait for them to grow, especially those smaller human service organizations that are less than 10 years from now. This, on the right-hand side, gives you a ratio of legacy giving to endowment size. No surprise, there are a few outliers. Higher education, again, you have an inherent donor base with graduates. The environment is extraordinary, and animal welfare, I think it's indicative of what we reported earlier on in terms of long-term relationships with these organizations for multiple decades, in fact. And then when you look at faith-based organization in religion, because it's just so dominant in terms of the large percentage of donors and revenue coming from religious organizations. So these are a handful of some of the insights that we want to share with you, and I'll ask Angel to give you some further detail about legacy giving, staffing, giving societies, and other opportunities to increase legacy giving. Thanks, Angel.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. So we're getting into some of the data that we requested to understand how an organization actually implements their plan giving program. So we're going to talk a little bit about the items that Tom mentioned, really getting into the infrastructure and the mechanisms of these plan giving programs. So first, legacy societies or giving societies. These stewardship mechanisms remain very popular among nonprofits. The question for us is how well leveraged and utilized are these programs? If we consider what donors want and then what they actually get, it seems most nonprofits can do more and probably better with their giving society membership, while also realizing that legacy gift donors don't need a lot of stewardship. Keep in mind, these are donors that are already giving to you annually. They're likely participating in major gift campaigns. So what they're looking for from your giving society with regard to their legacy gift is consistency and quality. So the challenge here, again, is that most nonprofits lack a fully dedicated staff person. And Tom did speak to the revenue implications of having at least one, if not two people dedicated to your program. But what that means in terms of your legacy society is that the management of it is likely to be inconsistent or uneven. So thinking about those staffing changes. So that then is, on the flip side, then we get organizations that try to do too much, even if they have staff. And then the staff then, might be challenged to keep up the pace of either events or stewardship materials. So simplicity, consistency, and quality is the name of the game here. So we recommend very specifically, again, not unsurprisingly, investing in staff and in resourcing so that your program is strong and it can withstand any internal shifts. And this is the crux of gift planning culture. So again, looking to see how can you make sure that your program is going to be supported regardless of what happens within the organization, knowing the importance of having a strong plan giving program. So in terms of dedicated staffing, again, nearly half of nonprofits have one or two full-time staff with a cumulative revenue of almost 30 million. And to Tom's point earlier, again, keeping those numbers in mind, 293% more than nonprofits with only part-time staff. Not to mention, if you think about those staff, if they're part-time on plan giving, they're likely part-time on other things. So the ability for them to direct their attention is limited. The ROI is high for investment in dedicated plan giving staff. These gifts, the plan gifts specifically, can yield anywhere from $57 to $100 per dollar spent, whereas major gifts yield $33 per dollar spent, and cash gifts in general yield anywhere from 3 to 8. So they're the least best option for your investment. The challenge here is that most nonprofit leadership are under pressure to bring in immediate use gifts, often in the form of cash. So what can you do? Well, we recommend sharing with all of your donors all the ways in which they can make a gift, and to highlight that there are benefits to the donor for gifting certain assets. And also thinking about which of those assets can be cash more immediately, if not in real time. So thinking about stocks. How are you messaging to your donors that they can give stock and there's a tax benefit to them potentially? Or their IRA contributions if they're of a certain age. Also real estate. So obviously we've jumped in complexity from stock and IRA gifts to real estate, but a piece of real estate can be sold and liquidated in a shorter time frame than, say, you might receive a bequest through a will or a trust. So also think about, how many conversations can you have with donors in addition to all the ways that they can give, where they will be able to offer an immediate use gift in the form of a non-cash asset, but also been thinking about a legacy gift, either of cash or assets, to ensure that you are continuing to build your future cash portfolio. Okay. Now, professional advisors were another question that we had, that we wanted to find out, because we know a lot of organizations utilize professional advisors, but to what extent? We did not find a strong correlation between having or engaging professional advisors in any specific capacity, but I will also say this was a bit more of a difficult data point to assess. Just by the nature of our process, we kept these questions fairly simple and straightforward. So there's a lot more here that we need to uncover. Generally speaking, the challenge is that professional advisors have a wealth of knowledge and expertise that nonprofits need to leverage better. So in terms of recommendations, what we see, what we offer, is, thinking about what are some of the obstacles that exist to legacy giving specifically, and how can professional advisors help you to overcome them. Specifically, when it comes to estate planning, only 1/3 of the US adult population has created a will or an estate plan. Also means that they may not be updated. So you don't want to leave out your high net worth or ultra high net worth donors. They very likely have an estate plan, but whether or not it's updated could be in question. So essentially what we're looking at then is more than half of our population is left without a way to protect themselves or their family or their assets. So if your nonprofit can proactively offer to connect your donors who either need to create or update their will or estate plan with local professional advisors, you're just helping them overcome that hurdle to being able to give to you from the bulk of their wealth. Any nonprofits lacking internal capacity or staff experience to fully staff and manage a plan giving program could look to professional advisors to fill that gap in the short term. But you also want to be mindful that these professional advisors need consistent and personal relationship building. The word that comes to mind for me when I think about plan giving in general is reciprocity, right? So what are we doing for our donors, not just asking for from them? And similar with professional advisors, what can your nonprofit offer? Certainly business would be one potential avenue, but also think about these professional advisors need education credits to continue with their certifications and their credentials. So there are often ways that nonprofits can host information sessions to be able to provide that for your professional advisors. Now, gift acceptance policies. Definitely not the most exciting thing I think that we'll talk about today, but from our perspective, it is the most important. So much so that it is consistently one of the top questions that our practice group addresses: how to update gift acceptance policies, which policies are appropriate based on the needs and operations of each of our nonprofit partners. And so we use this, this is one of the things that we focus on when we are working with a client, getting to know them, getting to understand how they operate. So most organizations have not updated their policies. Reviewing these, again, is something that should be part of sort of standard operating procedure. Also keep in mind that the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners and CASE have updated guidelines and best practices in the last couple of years. So we have real-time, current, helpful, robust ways to check our own policies, check your policies to ensure that they are meeting current standards and looking at best practice. So again, what are the main challenges here with having outdated policies? I would say first and foremost, it could put you in a position to delay or even worse, reject a gift from a donor that with foresight and a little planning, you could easily accept. We don't want you to be in that position. So if you notice that your gift acceptance policies haven't been updated or you're not sure, this is a great time to think about checking in on those. Also thinking about campaigns being a wonderful opportunity just to check in and see if what you have on the books is current. The other reason gift policies are so important is when it comes to counting legacy gifts and other revocable deferred gifts as well. So your policies will provide insight to everyone in the organization about what types of gifts may or may not, or should not be counted, either for the organization in general or towards a specific campaign. When your donor makes a deferred gift commitment, they've made a very important and very clear decision to invest in the future of your organization, and they care about you. They're putting you in a document in which they also include their family, hopefully. So we want to make sure that we are counting and recognizing these gifts appropriately. Now, the challenges we see with counting legacy and other revocable gifts is that counting and accounting tend to be conflated and are often confused and then cause some challenges between leadership, fundraisers, and financial staff. So in this context, counting does not necessarily mean that the gift is accounted for from a financial perspective. There are rules related to finance and accounting that guide those standards. What we're talking about is from the fundraising perspective. And think about it, counting as like recognition, right? So including this gift in your database, making and including the correct notes so that it can be stewarded beyond your time with the organization, because we're looking at long-time commitments here. So I want to make sure that we are honoring, valuing, recognizing, and stewarding the donor in the most appropriate way, and with an eye towards how is that stewardship going to last for 20, 30, 40 years, perhaps, depending on the type of gift. We also want to make sure that we continue to invite the donor to give, right? We know from Dr. James's research that a legacy gift is not the last gift that an organization makes, but rather it's one of the ones that it's really sort of a midpoint in many cases, and their giving will continue from there. So we recommend reviewing your policies a regular practice every 5 years and every time you embark on a major fundraising initiative. Also include a windfall policy. Now, this windfall policy will give your organization guidance when you receive those unexpected and unrestricted gifts, such as legacy gifts. And through predetermined conversation, decide how is that gift to be allocated. Certainly a portion of it will be used in the fiscal year in which it's received, but also a good chunk of it should be invested for the future. Now, in terms of collecting data, another question that we get often is what data collect? How is that collected? How do we use it? So we learned from our study that just over half of nonprofits consistently track ages and birthdays, and that's pretty significant data point to be tracking when we think about, again, wealth transfer, generational shifts, not only in giving, but also where the wealth is held. So by tracking ages, you'll be much better positioned to be able to segment your donors for specific engagement strategies, marketing and communications, even education and awareness campaigns around the types of gifts that they can give, where they will benefit, how they will benefit, and then obviously what that will mean for your vision and your mission. So the challenge here, internal processes may not be codified or documented. So it might leave that everyone's doing something different. Even just slight differences can mean huge, huge challenges on the back end when trying to pull this data out of your database or your CRM. And in other cases, we find that the database or the CRM may not be fully optimized to collect this information and or report on it consistently. So we recommend utilizing databases that offer this information through wealth searches, if you can get that as part of your database package. There's also a very inexpensive option of white pages, being able to use that as a source of information to gather this data. And in any case, again, just as with your gift acceptance policies, you do want to consider a review of your database and your CRM to ensure what you have actually meets your organizational needs. All right, so last poll for our session today. Go ahead and launch this. So curious, what is your main tactical takeaway from today's conversation thus far? I know we're asking you, it's been a lot of information we've thrown at you. Perhaps there's one that sticks out immediately. I'm always a fan of going with your gut in these types of cases. So we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to answer, and then we will move into our Q&A. And again, if you have questions, feel free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A function, and we will get to those momentarily. So we have about 40% of participants responding thus far. Again, we appreciate your immediate feedback on what has been helpful so far in this conversation. And it does seem to be pretty evenly split amongst all the different options there.
Angel, it's interesting when you think about the first question we asked, which was about challenges having to do with sort of staffing and investing. It pops up again, right? 38%
Yes.
When you add making the case for investment or professional development for all fundraising, 4 out of 10 responses are in those particular area. I love the others where it's all of the above. I saw that in the chat where it's all of the above.
All of them, yes. And that, I think, Tom, can be one of the biggest overarching challenges, I would say, with plan giving. And our dear colleague Ray Happy would always say, you can't boil the ocean. So one of the things that we focus on when we're working with organizations, particularly to review their plan giving program, and inclusive in that is actually the culture that underpins all of that. Again, going back to that gift planning culture, is understanding where is the area of opportunity. because we could address all of these things. But what we look to do when we're working with our nonprofit partners is find the points of easy acceptance and integration, where we know we can start to get some quick wins, build momentum, and then from that momentum, you get more and more converts to the importance of planned giving. And from there, it just takes on a life of its own. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and move into the Q&A. So again, feel free to use the Q&A function here. It's easier, I think, for us to keep track, but also you're feel free to use the chat. And I'll invite my other colleagues to chime in as well if they have questions that they see that need to be answered. Angel, I think the first question, or the one at least that I see up here from Tamara that came in just a moment or so ago, is pretty interesting, which is, are donors sort of locked into their giving habits, right? So are folks who are annual donors and those who give to legacy still open to donating to campaigns, or is there a tendency to give significant gifts? They are open indeed. What are campaigns intended to do, right? Oftentimes campaigns are intended to lift up a particular organization as they face a pressing need, or someone's got a tremendous idea and there's a promising opportunity ahead. So it's not inconsistent to see donors make their way from annual giving and legacy giving into capital campaigns. They should be invited to do so because they've just been role modeling all along. Great question, Tamara. Joanne has a question, Tom. She asked you about the report on the legacy gifts as a percentage of revenue. Was it percentage of gift revenue or total organizational revenue? So that, Joanne, we were reporting on legacy gifts as a percentage of overall fundraising revenue.
Angel, we also have a question here about what do we mean by blended proposals?
Great question. You want to take that one, Jeremy?
Absolutely. So when we look at blended proposals, we look at opportunities to get immediate cash in the door by having someone make a cash gift, a stock gift, whatever that might be, as well as a legacy gift to the organization. We've found that people that are giving those gifts are giving larger gifts. And with the legacy gift component of it, they're more invested in the long-term future of the organization. If you're going to put an organization in your will or in some kind of a legacy, you're going to want to make sure they're still around and that they're still doing the things that you're hoping they'll do. And the best way to do that is to make sure they're fully funded. So that's what we mean by blended proposals.
Thanks, Jeremy. John has a question about the average breakdown of how legacy gifts are used, annual budget versus endowment. That actually was not a data point that we gathered, John. In fact, we were hoping to get some insight into that based on the amount of legacy gifts relative to endowment size. Our assumption was that, more legacy gifts will correlate to a higher endowment. That was not something that we found. So that is a question that we will continue to research, might be included in our next report. So stay tuned. Angel, there's a question here from Jennifer. And the question is, what's the best age of the donor to begin planned giving conversations? Correct me on this, but I recall that in a recent survey that I think it was the age of 53 was the average first time planned gift, but that the age 44 is when families start to think about estate planning and they weave in planned giving at that particular time. Are those ages accurate? And did I define that correctly? Yes. So 53, definitely average age for a first charitable gift. 44 is the average age for the first will. So whether or not the gifts are included at that point, that wasn't clear. And this was from Giving USA's Leaving a Legacy report that came out in late 2019. But essentially younger, decades younger than I think most of us typically think about the ideal planned giving donor. I would add to that, Tom, thinking about, again, these generational shifts and how the wealth is moving. We're now looking at, elder millennials in their early 40s, right? So they are prime candidates for having these conversations and setting up their estate plans and their wills if they haven't already. They're also being positioned in a position to, that line of inheritance from their silent generation and baby boomer parents and grandparents. So never too early to start the conversation. I'll also add that presenting the information again from that donor-centric perspective, from the donor's view of how this will help them, means that you can talk about this at any age. Actually, I'll invite my colleague Christiana, if she's on, to talk a little bit about ages related to life events and milestones. Christiana, are you on?
I am. I'm so glad you asked, Angel. I answered one person in the chat about this, but we like to say that philanthropy, when done well, is about what we want for people, not what we want from people. And so one of the biggest triggers that you can be watching for to see if somebody is ready for some sort of a gift planning conversation is just based on what's happening in their life. So did they have a baby recently? They're probably going to be thinking about a will. Are they preparing for retirement or selling a business? They're going to be looking at some of these options for them because life events are often taxable events. And so it's just a really great time for you to go to them and say, hey, I'm so happy for you. Did you know that you can support the church or the charity that you love, but also you can think about this as part of your retirement planning, or you can support the organization you love and get an income stream for your family. We'd love to give you some more information on that you can explore with your financial planner. So that's a really natural way that whether you have a plan giving person or you have a really small staff and a really small budget, those are conversations that come out of relationship. So I would encourage you to watch for people's just natural life transitions.
Thanks so much, Christiana. So continuing down, we have lots of questions in the Q&A function. Thank you so much. So a question from Dan. In terms of recognition, how long do you keep deceased folks on the recognition list? Or does it depend on how long your list is? If I've got 15, I probably keep them on longer than if I have 150. Great question, Dan. I'll also open this up to participants. I think this is very much an organizational culture question. I would agree if your list is shorter, you may want to keep folks on, though I will offer, and this was on one of our slides in terms of legacy or giving societies, perhaps thinking about rethinking the legacy giving society, and can you just shift it to a giving society where you include not only legacy gifts, but major gifts of assets as well. We have worked with organizations where, as happens, the legacy giving program loses momentum over time. Perhaps there's a staff change, but in any case, it hasn't had the direct sort of hands-on management that it really needs. And so they saw the membership decline. And if it's solely focused on legacy gifts, you can imagine that leaves you in a potentially very sad place where you have a lot of deceased members, not as many living members. So one way to combat that, and also a way to just, include more of your donors in a broader, more diverse donor community, would to think about broadening your criteria there. So I would say, think about it, what it means for your organization. If you have living family members for those deceased donors, I would keep them in mind as well. They may be concerned if they see their beloved one's name removed from the list. So that would invite you then to perhaps speak to the family, which is always a good opportunity then to consider additional giving options for the family as well.
Andrew, there's a question there, or a point that's there. It's really interesting from Lori. And it says that Russell James refers to documenting bequests as trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. Reminds me of being sick in the 4th grade. Until it comes in, there is no number is, quote, real. And
Right.
we were speaking yesterday, as you recall, about how do you leverage perhaps a planned gift when a nonprofit is trying to raise money for immediate capital needs. I don't know if Jeremy or Angel, if you want to sort of weigh in on that, so that the quote, the number may not be, quote, real, but it can be leveraged.
Sure. Jeremy, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree. It definitely can be leveraged when we look at the fact that, what does the statistic say? It's something to the effect of like 92% of those that, I think it's actually as high as 97, sorry. 97% of those that make a legacy gift to your organization are also going to continue making annual fund gifts. So even if you can't nail down that exact number, and that exact number is hard to specify, building that relationship with them, it goes a long way in terms of, it's not going to be a definitive number until it comes in. It still gives you an opportunity to steward that donor, and knowing that amount and knowing how they might want to be stewarded and building that relationship is probably going to be more valuable to your organization in the long run. So as long as you're transparent with how you're counting those gifts and how you're addressing them and sharing them out, I think that at the end of the day, the actual dollar amount probably isn't as important as what you're able to do with the donor and how you're able to help them moving forward.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'll add too that in my experience, and one of the reasons we wanted to focus on legacy giving is because these gifts tend to act as a gateway gift, I'll call it, that once a donor makes this type of gift, because of the process that it requires, right? Again, thinking from the donor's perspective, if I'm going to put an organization in my will, I have to have that will. And in order to have that will, I have to take stock or take a full account of my wealth, right? So I'm going through and I'm looking at all of my various financial accounts and where my wealth is held, and including my house and other retirement assets and things like that. So I have a much better picture of where I stand financially when I've gone through that process. So making that initial legacy gift often opens the doors for the donor to think about, how can I gift more to the charities that I love sooner? One great example of this is a theater that we were working with recently, where the donor, she was a founding member of the theater. She'd been involved the entire time, served on the board, served as board chair, et cetera. So long storied history, incredibly generous, and wanted to give a very large gift through a bequest. So, and not only was it through a bequest, but there was a naming opportunity that the theater wanted to confer on her. So they knew, based on the relationship, and quite frankly, the fact that she was always, on time with her payments, they didn't have any concerns there. But could they rationalize giving a naming opportunity to this donor for a deferred gift? After some internal conversation, we told them, yes, you really should, given the donor, it makes sense for your organization and your culture and just all of those things to do that, to offer this to her. They offered it to her. And then a few months later, she came back and wanted to talk to them about how she could gift more of her bequest sooner, putting it into a trust, going through all other types of giving vehicles. So think about legacy gifts as just the initial step. And often once those gifts have been discussed and are created, the donor starts to think differently about how they can give more sooner. So I'm just mindful of the time. We'll do our best to get through a few more questions. There's going to be more in the chat than I think we'll be able to get to during conversation, but we will do our best to follow up with each of you separately. So I also want to invite my other colleagues, Christopher, Hannah, Christiana, if there's any questions that you see that you want to answer, please chime in.
Hey, Angel, it's Christopher. Hey, did we do first of all, thank you all for the wonderful questions. It's a lot of engagement. We're trying to get through all of the answers. Did we mention anything about when people should review their gift policies, their gift acceptance policies? That was a question that was in the chat. Did I miss it? Because I've been focused on the answers here.
Angel, there was a little garble there, so I'm going to say every 5 years was the response. Chris.
Yeah, every 5 years. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Angel.
Hi, Angel, and hi, Tom. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. One of the other questions that came up in the chat that I'd love to address regarding gift acceptance policies as well is where to find best practices and resources on accessing information related to gift acceptance policies. We recommend utilizing the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, CASE, the Council for the Advancement of School. I am getting their acronym incorrectly. CASE is our major education institution. They have great gift acceptance policies, and AFP, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, all have best practices as it relates to gift acceptance policies and ethics regarding various types of gifts. These three organizations are leading that. And when CCS takes time to review the gift acceptance policies for our nonprofit partners, those are the resources that we utilize. So we recommend using all of those three resources as they are leading the industry. CASE and the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners both updated their policies in 2021 to make them much more inclusive and to really focus on the stewardship of donors to enhance planned gifts in particular. So we recommend certainly taking a look and refreshing yours as it makes sense.
Paige has a great question. These are all great questions, and Jeremy's in the midst of responding to it now. But Paige's question is typically, who's best positioned to build the relationship with potential major or legacy gift prospects? For example, is it the board, the executive director, the staff? The answer is yes, all of the above. But naturally, you have to have some kind of a relationship, and it depends upon timing, and it depends upon how acquainted any or all of these are with potential donor. But the follow-up question is, how do you engage the board in these types of asks? I would suggest that the first thing that we ask the board to do is just become acquainted with the notion of gift planning. Number two, to demonstrate to the board how impactful it can be. Number three, to ask them to invest in it, as many of us responded to earlier on. Number four, make their own planned gift and serve as role models before they're even asked to participate. I would just kind of close on this comment is that, with boards, board members have to build the muscle when it comes to fundraising, right? They literally have to build the muscle. They're not going to be perfect solicitors on day one. And so I would ask you to think about when working with board members to build that fundraising muscle is ask them first to help steward a donor or thank a donor, right? Then the second thing they can do is convene donors. And then finally, they can be part of a particular ask or an engagement. In that way, if they're thanking the donor, they get an authentic moment to sort of share with them their role as a board. And frankly, it helps the board member become even better equipped. They hear firsthand from donors, and then eventually you can engage them and deploy them in this kind of a work. But Jeremy, thanks for responding.
The other question, it looks like we got the most here in the chat. I think I saw 4 or 5 of them that we answered, was in regard to where we got the number of 120,000 as the average legacy gift. And that, as we answered in the chat for a few of these people, and I think we got to all of them, was based specifically on the survey that we sent out this year to nonprofits asking for answers to a lot of questions, that being one of them. So that's where those came from. And you'll get a copy of that report tomorrow with this webinar as well. But to answer that question, it was based on the survey respondents we received over the course of the beginning, probably 2-3 months in the beginning of this year.
And Jeremy, there's a couple of questions. Caesar asked it, and so did Al asked a little bit earlier about sort of best in class diocesan shops or the kind of work that can be done with churches. We just worked with a great partner in Kansas City, and maybe Jeremy or others can share some findings there. But you would look. I'll throw a couple of people under the bus. Patrick Grace at the Diocese of Cleveland is first class. Jim Kelly is remarkable, and he's in Charlotte. There are others, of course, that have particular foundations throughout the country that are really robust and have embraced it. But again, Jeremy or others, maybe just a quick snapshot on the work with Kansas City. And I know we have to close in just a moment.
Yeah, I mean, so they were looking at trying to better understand their donors and what potential existed out there for legacy gifts. So in addition to some research that we had done, we did a survey that we had sent out. And as a part of that survey, they ended up finding a lot of people had already named them in their wills and their estates, and they had no clue about it, as we learned earlier today. And so they found like a large group of people that they were already be able to have those initial conversations with. And then they also found another large size group of people that wanted more information on it. So a lot of the work we did was just trying to help them identify the donors that they should start with. Because that's probably one of the biggest things people look at is they look at all of the potential donors that are out there at the moment. And that's a lot of people to try and approach at once. How do we focus in on who we should start with, as opposed to becoming overwhelmed with the sheer volume that it could be. So that was one of the things that we had helped them with. And then just looking at how do we change that conversation moving forward and adjust that focus.
Thanks, Jeremy. Super grateful for all of you for participating. Upwards of nearly 700 folks participated in this webinar, had literally dozens of questions, one of the most engaged groups that we have. Tells us, of course, the deep interest in planned giving. As noted before, we'll send this deck and the report out tomorrow, I believe, to all those that have registered. Please visit us on our website. We have blogs and insights that are updated very, very regularly. Don't be afraid to reach out to us if you need some advice and counsel. Happy to support you. But keep with it, folks. This is an extraordinary part of the work that we do. Part of our role, of course, is to be best in class in terms of practitioners. And as gift planning becomes more and more of an opportunity to drive revenue, what it really means is driving your missions. Because we are just so grateful for your partnership and your leadership, the work you do as fundraisers, as board members, as practitioners is just amazing. And we're just, overjoyed that we get to work in this space. So best wishes in your own mission work. The colleges, the hospitals, the healthcare institutions that you lead are really important. So with that, I think, Angel, we'll wrap it up and acknowledge once again the great participation of those that served as panelists.